The afternoon sun was sinking behind the rugged, copper-colored hills when Clara stepped onto the porch of the Lone Creek Ranch, her breath catching a little from the long walk back from the south field. Dust clung to her boots, her jeans, even her hair, and she brushed at it uselessly, wishing the day had ended smoother. The wooden boards creaked under her steps, but that wasn't what made her freeze. It was the sight of him. Jax Maddox, broad-shouldered, sun-tanned, and eternally stubborn, stood leaning against the porch post like a man carved straight out of ranchland steel. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing rough forearms flecked with dirt and the faint line of an old rope burn. His jaw was set, his brown eyes simmering with that look she'd come to know all too well. He wasn't angry. He was dangerously concerned, and in his hand was a razor. Her razor. Clara's heart performed a little somersault. She stopped mid-step, her hand instinctively flying to her cheek where a small bandage peeked from beneath her hairline. The morning's mishap, a slip while shaving before the mirror, had been small, barely a sting. She'd shrugged it off and gone straight to work. Jax clearly hadn't shrugged off anything. "You shave, and I'll kill you," he announced, low and fierce, the words rolling out like thunder across an open field. For a heartbeat, Clara just blinked. The threat wasn't real. Not with that rough, protective edge in his voice, the one that always betrayed the softer heart he tried to bury under layers of dust, denim, and stubborn pride. "Jax, no," he cut her off, pushing away from the post and crossing the porch with long, deliberate strides. "Not today. Not after the doc told you not to touch that cut till the stitches settle." Clara rolled her eyes. It was just a tiny slip. Hardly even. Tiny slip, my boot. He held up the razor between two fingers like it offended him personally. "You almost reopened the whole damn thing." She huffed. "Please. I've had worse. That ain't comfortin' me any." Jax stopped right in front of her, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of pine soap and leather that clung to him. He reached out and, before she could react, tugged the brim of her hat lower over her forehead, hiding half her face. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Warnin' you," he muttered. "If you can't see the razor, maybe you'll stop tryin' to use it." Clara swatted at his hand. "You're being dramatic. And you're being reckless." "I'm fine, Jax." He stared at her for a long moment, jaw flexing, eyes frustrated, scared, something deeper than annoyance simmering just beneath the surface. Without another word, Jax slipped an arm behind her back, another under her knees. "Jax, don't you dare." He lifted her clean off the porch. "Put me down," she yelped, thumping his shoulder with her fist. "I swear, Jax Maddox." "Nope," he said simply, carrying her like she weighed nothing but a stray bale of hay. He didn't grunt. He didn't wobble. He didn't even pretend to struggle. "Jax, people can see." "Good," he replied, stepping inside the house, boots thudding on the wood floor with absolute, unbothered confidence. "Maybe someone else'll tell you the same thing I've been sayin'." Clara fought the urge to bury her face in her hands. The ranch hands outside were probably staring. The dogs were definitely staring. And Jax was acting like this was the most normal thing in the world. "You're impossible," she muttered. "And you're reckless," he countered, shutting the door with a nudge of his boot. "Guess we're even." He carried her straight to the couch in the main room, her protests bouncing off him like harmless dust on a fence post. When he finally set her down, it wasn't with the rough, swift motion she expected. It was slow, careful, too careful. It made her chest tighten. Jax hovered for half a second, brushing a loose strand of hair away from her bandaged cheek with the gentlest touch she'd ever felt from a man who handled wild horses for a living. "You scared me today," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Clara swallowed. Her anger, her irritation, everything melted into something she wasn't prepared to name. She opened her mouth, trying to find the right words. But Jax was already taking a step back, razor still in hand, eyes burning with stubborn protectiveness. "That's it," he said, turning toward the kitchen drawer. "You're done with this thing. Permanently." And with a decisive clatter, he tossed the razor into the drawer, far from her reach, sealing the unspoken promise in his own quiet, rough way. Life at Lone Creek Ranch, Clara realized, wasn't just unpredictable. It was becoming something else entirely. Inside the house, the fire in the stone hearth crackled softly, spreading a warm glow across the wooden floorboards and the faded rug Clara had once insisted they needed. The room smelled faintly of coffee, pine logs, and the lingering scent of saddle leather. As Jax set her down on the sofa, she felt the heat of embarrassment rising to her cheeks, not from the wound, but from the way he'd carried her in like she was breakable. Clara crossed her arms tightly. "You can't just haul me around like some misplaced sack of feed." Jax didn't respond immediately. Instead, he crouched in front of her, resting his forearms on his knees. His hat sat backwards on his head, pushing a stray lock of dark hair out of his eyes. Those eyes, deep brown and unyielding, studied her with a mixture of irritation and something she struggled not to read too deeply into. "I'm not mad," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "I'm scared." The simplicity of the confession made her chest tighten. Scared. This was Jax Maddox, the man who dragged injured cattle out of flash floods, who faced down storms like they were minor inconveniences, who had stared a wild bull straight in the eyes and muttered, "Try me." "You don't get scared," Clara said quietly. He snorted. "Then I guess you don't know me as well as you think." Clara looked down at her hands, fingers fiddling with a loose thread at the edge of her denim jacket. She felt ridiculous. She hadn't meant to make a big deal of the small cut on her cheek. She certainly didn't expect him to react like this. "I didn't mean to worry you," she said softly. "You do a real good job at it anyway." There was no bite in his voice now, only a weary frustration that felt far more intimate than anger. It made her stomach flip uncomfortably, stirring feelings she'd buried deep since arriving at Lone Creek Ranch months ago. In silence, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out the small tin of herbal salve he carried around like a sheriff carried his badge. Clara's eyebrows lifted. "You keep that with you?" she asked, surprised. "Started after you got that rope burn 3 weeks ago," he muttered. "Didn't like the way you tried to hide it." Her face warmed. She had no idea he'd noticed that, or cared. He opened the tin, and the scent of eucalyptus filled the air. Scooting closer, he tilted her chin up gently with his thumb. She stiffened, not from pain, but from the sudden closeness. "Hold still," he murmured. She did. His fingertips brushed the edge of the bandage, careful, slow, as though afraid too much pressure might break her. The salve spread coolly over her skin, easing the sting she hadn't realized was still there. She watched him, studying the lines of concentration on his face, the softness that betrayed how deeply he felt things he rarely said. "You don't have to take care of me," she whispered. "Someone's gotta," he said. "And you sure as hell won't do it yourself." She glared, but he ignored it as he smoothed the bandage back into place. When he finished, he closed the tin, slipped it into his back pocket, and leaned back on his heels. "Fine," she muttered, crossing her arms again. No shaving. Happy. Jax didn't smile. Not at first. He stared at her a long moment, that unreadable expression churning beneath the surface. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth tugged upward in the smallest smirk. Not really, he said. Clara frowned. Why not? He tipped his hat back and leaned closer, his voice lowering to a warm, rumbling whisper. "'Cause I'd be happier if you finally admitted someone around here gives a damn when you get hurt." Her breath caught. There it was. The unfiltered truth. Raw, unexpected, dangerous. She opened her mouth, but he stood abruptly before she could respond, brushing off his jeans like he hadn't just dropped a word-shaped grenade between them. He strode toward the kitchen, pushing the razor drawer shut with a firm click. "Now stay put," he called over his shoulder. "I'm making supper." Clara blinked. "You cooking? This I gotta see." "Yeah, well," he grumbled, tugging an apron off a hook, "if I don't feed you myself, you'll probably wander out there and get trampled by a calf or stabbed by a butter knife." "A butter knife, Jax? With you, I ain't talkin' chances." She shook her head, but a smile tugged at her lips despite her best efforts. Jax moved about the kitchen with surprising ease, pulling vegetables from baskets, slicing onions with quick, practiced motions. The dog settled beside the sofa, as though guarding her under his unspoken orders. Clara leaned back against the cushions, watching him. In that moment, under the warm, steady light of the fire, with Jax muttering at pots and pans like they'd wronged him, Clara realized something she'd been trying to ignore. Lone Creek Ranch wasn't just becoming home. Jax Maddox was becoming something far more dangerous to her heart.